Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today from wherever you are in the world. So I'm Hannah Lester, and I'm the Scientific Director at KindEarth.Tech Consulting, a consultancy based in Barcelona where we help people and companies with their regulatory issues, specifically related to food and feed products. Okay, so why the title? Why fun and regulatory are not naturally compatible? So there's a story here. So basically Ira, one of the KET co-founders and co-organizers of this conference, asked me to send in a fun title for my talk. So I thought, and I thought, and I thought, and I really wanted to come up with something that was fun, clever, and culturally relevant. So first off, I came up with regulations are like a box of chocolates. You never know what's coming next. I thought most people would understand the reference, and the analogy seemed about right. So I then started to think about this, and I thought, and I thought, and I came to the realization that actually in the regulatory world, the majority of the time, we do actually know what's coming next. So in the EU especially, there are endless public consultations where stakeholders can have their say on current and future regulations. And one thing we do know for certain is that regulations and regulatory requirements only get tougher and not easier. So for example, from March 27th next year, we will have a new EU regulation on transparency, which will cover all regulated products in the food chain, so from novel foods, animal feed, to pesticides. So this regulation came about because of EU consumer pressure about the safety of glyphosate and the studies used to support the authorization of the product and the reauthorization of the product. So consumers wanted more transparency and access to the data that are used to support glyphosate and other products in the food chain. So in fact, this regulation was not sprung on us out of the blue, and we've known it's been coming for several years now. The regulation itself was published in September 2019 and will only apply from March next year. So we've actually had over a year and a very long transition period to get used to this regulation. So that title was no good, so back to the drawing board. So I then thought of drawing a comparison between regulations and Pandora's box. I really thought I was onto something here, and I could see that regulations could be construed as a great source of great and unexpected troubles, and at the end there's hope. So I started thinking this through and then thought, well, maybe this is over the top and this probably doesn't fit either. So as we all know, when Pandora opened the box or the jar, she released plagues, sickness and death into the world. And thinking this through, actually regulations are there to protect us from plagues, sickness and death, and indeed to protect human health, animal health and the environment. And in the EU, without doubt, we have the toughest food regulations and regulatory framework. I mean, we have regulations for everything from novel foods, traditional foods, pesticide residues, GMOs, antimicrobial resistance, animal welfare, even down to the size and shape of the carrots you get in the supermarket. But on the flip side to this is we do have the safest food chain in the world. So the Pandora's box thing was no good either, so back to the drawing board. At this point I was completely stumped, so I emailed Ira to ask for more time to think about a fun regulatory title. And in this email, I said, I'm really struggling because fun and regulatory are not naturally compatible. Within seconds, Ira had emailed me back and said, I have a title for you. Why fun and regulatory are not naturally compatible. So there you go. That's the story behind my title. And now I need to explain why fun and regulatory are not naturally compatible. So when I was thinking through about what I wanted to say, I realised that there are actually lots of fun things about regulations. No, honestly there is, and I'll tell you why. So I guess it ultimately depends on your personality, but for me, I really love regulatory work because, number one, I really like problem solving. It's great when you get a really complicated product and you find a solution or solutions for your client. So, for example, we've recently helped a food startup to avoid going through a very lengthy novel food authorization by building a case to demonstrate non-novelty to present to the authorities. In this instance, the scientists that had developed this product had come up with an incredibly techy, very sciencey name for what was essentially just a protein hydrolysate. So we persuaded them to just call it a protein hydrolysate. We built the dossier to present to the authorities, and fortunately the authorities agreed that this protein hydrolysate was not novel. So this saved the client the whole process of going through a novel food authorization, so saved them a lot of time and money. So that was a good outcome. Number two, I really like telling people what to do. Not in a bossy or smart-ass way, but I really like it when we're able to tell our clients what they need to do in order to get their product to market. So one of my favourite parts of my job is performing what we call data audit and gap analysis. So this is where we analyse the product and look at all of the data available to identify the study and data gaps and to identify the studies that need to be performed to support a novel food dossier. So once we've audited all the data and identified the gaps, we then build a regulatory roadmap, which is a blueprint for the client to follow in order to get all of the data they need to build their dossier. Number three, I really love a good argument. It's so satisfying when you go into battle with the authorities. You study the case, you do your research and look for precedents, you prepare your arguments and justifications, and then you enter into battle. One of my favourite arguments is trying to convince the authorities that animal studies are not needed to support the safety of some products, and proposing alternatives, so using the literature or proposing alternative in vitro tests. And we've had several successful outcomes on this, so this is really good. Number four, I know it sounds really cheesy, but I really do love helping people. I love KindEarth.Tech and what it stands for, and I love meeting all the amazing people here and hearing about all the incredible projects that people are working on. But what happens is I get really upset when I see a fantastic new food product being developed and I can see the regulatory issues that the company will face, and I really want to help. So there are regulatory considerations for all food products, and regulations can seem daunting and dull and a roadblock to what you're trying to achieve. However, you can really save time and money and heartache by getting your regulatory strategy sorted from the very early stages of product development. So I have a really good example for you. So I'm sure you've all heard of Just Ink and their Just Egg product. If you haven't, I'm not sure where you've been. So this alternative egg product has gone crazy in the US and is now taking on Singapore and Southeast Asia. So why isn't it here in the EU? And the simple answer are regulations. So one of the ingredients that they use in their product is considered a novel food in the EU. So that was that. No market entry until that ingredient gets approval as a novel food. This novel food approval process typically takes 2 to 3 years. because you need to perform the studies, you need to write the dossier, get the dossier evaluated, and the approval granted. So the lesson here is the sooner you know if your product or ingredients raise any regulatory red flags, the better. So to wrap up, often regulations are perceived as dull, but they are a necessary evil. Understanding the regulations and having a solid regulatory strategy will help you in the long run. And depending on your personality, regulations can be fun. So thank you all very much for listening, and please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Thank you very much.